Was happening?
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to first installment of the second season of our podcast content here for the ILABTD League. I'm joined by the commissioner and the defending champion. What a honor to be with you two this evening here. How are you guys doing?
Absolutely. Not bad at all. Getting a little restless, obviously. The draft isn't done yet, but we're working our way there. It'll be done by Thursday, so that's all that matters, I guess.
I'm ready for some football, and I'm ready to ruffle some feathers again on my way to my next ship.
This was yeah, as Colin, as you noted, this was our post draft recap last year. But given the timing, with 2.5 rounds left in this year's draft, this is going to be a mid draft episode recapping the action so far. And who knows, maybe making some predictions about the last 2.5 rounds of the draft.
Yeah. Real quick, I know you are reporting, but do you have all three of us on here, or is it just the speaker that shows up?
It should be all three of us unless I'm sharing content. And then, like, if I share the draft screen, then it's just the speaker with the draft screen.
Okay, I just want to make sure that it's like, whatever you see is what it's recording. So if it sees all three of us, then we're good.
Yeah, that's the way it
Yeah,
All right,
worked last year when I was
perfect.
doing these. So I think that's how it will work.
I gotcha. All right. All right.
Well, why don't we start kind of big picture? Any thoughts so far? We're on pick 17.5 here. Thoughts on how the draft has unfolded? Any trends you've noticed? Interesting strategies anybody's taken? Colin, Mr. Commissioner, why don't we begin with you?
Sure, yeah. So before we get into like the specific picks and everyone's teams and all that, I wanted to just have my say on the draft itself and the style we're using. I do believe that we have not found the best way to draft, right? I mean, I'm a little bit anxious, impatient because of how long it's taking. It seems like everyone else might also feel the same way. It feels like it's dragging on. It feels like this isn't the best way we can do it. Um, but then on the other hand, we haven't been able to find a specific date. We didn't really try this year to find out the best date in a specific time slot. But my opinion definitely is I'd rather keep everyone like decently happy than, you know, having one guy not have the exact team he wants. So I understand that this is frustrating. Not everyone, getting to pick, more than two picks a day. But as far as everyone having the team that they want, so far, I think this might be the best option, even though I'm definitely all ears for different suggestions. But until we find a time slot or a day that everyone can draft, I think this is the way that we'll have to continue to do it, going forward.
yeah. I mean, I think it worked last year, right? Because people were in different situations, and we might have been all more consolidated into similar time zones. But um, I think I don't know if we took as much of an effort to find one date this year that worked for everybody for one night. So I think if we did that next year, we could probably find a time at least. I mean, this should get done in at most 3 hours, right, in one sitting. So I think we can do that for sure next year if we find a time to work for everybody.
I think the hard part about this style of draft is, like, take today, right, where we've been stuck on a particular pick. I mean, information is coming out, like players' health, and there's things emerging about depth charts and things, right? And I don't think anyone is gaming how long they're taking for a pick or trying to have like an information asymmetry when they're making a choice. But you are almost at a disadvantage by making a pick quickly, and you could like have an advantage by a piece of information comes out while you're on the clock, and you can use that to adjust like your pick on the fly, right? Like, I mean, if I were on the clock right now, there's a player who I might pick that earlier today I might not have picked, right, like based
Sure.
on some potential injury news. So um, I think, like, trying to do the draft when the information that everyone has from start to finish is as close to the same as possible either by doing it like in a 3 hour span or by saying like over this weekend we need to get the draft done or something would be better than like over a 10-day span where, cuts were made and players were, signed to new teams and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I
Yeah.
agree. I think we will fine tune this. I'm not saying it's got to be within 3 hours or it's got to be over the course of the time from the last preseason to the first game. I do think that it would be helpful. Like right now, if you're watching this, send a message in the text saying like what you think should be done or what you should change. I'm talking to the viewers. Because
And
I think
if you're not in the league, comment on this video.
right. I think it's gonna take some time to figure out the best way to draft. This has been frustrating. But I want to make sure everyone's happy with their team. That's the goal. I know, this 10-day thing, people were getting cut on the Monday we started. There have been a couple big time injuries. I mean, that would have happened even if we finished the draft a week ago. So we'll get to it. Another thing that I think is a drawback from this, now that we can shift into the specific picks, is like this has taken so long. I feel like I've lost track of my own strategy. There was several times where I could have gotten a handcuff or like a team stack, and I just like it took me so long to get to my next pick that I was like, oh shit, I forgot about Damian Harris. You know, um, I'm still happy with my team, but I kind of lost track of my own strategy because of 24 hours in between each pick.
Yeah.
I will say just one thing, since this is our second year doing this pod and our second post draft podcast. I will just kind of looking back at last year's draft, at the way that at least the first couple rounds played out compared to this year's. I mean, you can definitely see a different strategy that's kind of taking over fantasy in general, right? Like we probably would have been hard pressed to pick a wide receiver with the first pick or first couple of picks last year, right? So, and adding to that the new wrinkle this year with adding a third starting wide receiver and an additional bench spot, right? So that adds a little bit of complexity to what our starting lineups looks like. That probably makes our first 8-9 picks looks a little bit different than it was last year. Not to mention, the change in overall strategy of, aging running backs and wide receivers have more value now. So I thought it was interesting that, I mean, if this draft happened last year, I think it would have been a lot more, I don't know, head scratching than last year. So even though Tyreek was taken second overall last year.
For sure. I would further that by saying, like, in years past, I've always been in a situation where I feel like I got to get my running backs in now. Whereas now I got to get my receivers in now. I got to have these extra receivers. And I wanted to add that third receiver spot just as a little tweak. I understand Jason isn't a big fan of it. He said, what isn't broke, don't fix, whatever. But I think it was more of a what isn't broke, you can improve. So I feel like this is just trending with the way that fantasy is going, with these wide receivers being more dominant than your typical bell cow running back.
Yeah, but even Jason only took one running back in the first 6 rounds, right? So it definitely like impacted his draft strategy. I feel like the roster is right now in terms of the number of starters. I mean, like I was trying to figure out at the top of the draft, like what was my main takeaway, but I think you can frame it a number of different ways, which I feel like is like a tip of the cap to the fact that I feel like we have the balance right. Like there was only 3 wide receivers taken in the first 9 picks, right? More running backs in the first 9 picks than receivers. But over the first 2 rounds, more receivers than running backs. And only one team this year went running back in the first 2 rounds, right? So like I feel like we had 4 or 5 last year that did that. So
Right.
I think 3 receivers, 2 backs is good. I kind of like the balance that brought to the draft.
I like the variety of strategies that it opens the door up to. When there's consolidated strategies, it's really more of the luck of the draw than of did your player get hurt, or how you allocate that draft capital in the beginning of the year. I like that there's a little more variety of strategy now with those different roster spots.
Yep.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad that I think balance is a good word there. We know that there's going to be more receiver depth, so might as well get a third receiver spot in there. You choose what you want to do with the flex spots. And balance, I think, is a good way to put it. Another trend I kind of noticed just based on looking back here just today. I don't know if this is up or down compared to last year, but there's a lot of people getting team stacks, right? So Willie, his first two picks were Buffalo Bills, Allen and Diggs. Then you got Nick doing Christian Kirk and Etienne. Plus you got Kirk Cousins and Madison. Troy with the two Joes on the Bengals. Eric has Tua and Mostert. And I have Herbert and a rookie receiver on the Chargers. I feel like, I mean, with how many picks everyone has, you're bound to have two players from the same team. But the quarterback skill position combo, that team stack, I feel like that's more than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I agree. I also took Tyler Boyd as a wide receiver handcuff to Jamar Chase. My thought being like, I'm probably only going to start Chase, but if he got hurt for some reason, I think Boyd would become valuable.
I was
Another
gonna
team stack of a sense.
Sure. I was gonna say the same kind of the opposite point though. There aren't that many handcuffs this year. The only two that I really found, other than the one you just mentioned, was Troy with Pacheco and McKinnon, and then you got Rob with Swift and Gainwell from the Eagles. Other than that, I don't see a lot of handcuffs this year, which is surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak for myself. And this kind of, I know we were going to talk about our teams here in a minute as well. Like my strategy running back wise was I wanted as many guys that I felt like are clear RB1s as possible early in the draft. And then I'm hoping that I have enough to survive the season with four having to fill like 2 or 3 roster spots. But I also went for guys that I feel like are backups to potentially injury prone players so that maybe one of those two and Samaje Perine and Elijah Mitchell hits and I can extract some value from Collins since he has both of those starters.
Yes.
It's a pretty good bet to bet on Collins' team getting injured. So that was my thought process there.
Well, I kind of did the same thing. I have 4 clear RB1s on my team. And between those 4, I only need to start 2 of them in a week. So I'm giving myself that security with RB1s. I don't want to mess with the backups. I'll get the backups. I'll get the guys that show up later in the season. But right now, I feel like I have security at the RB1 spot.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, with the addition of the receiver spot, it makes the running back spot a little bit more valuable too. Like you can maybe hit on a flyer on a receiver in a later round, but if you don't, I mean, I see a couple people in this draft who've only taken 3 running backs through the first 16 rounds, right? So it's definitely a risk you're taking and stacking up on receiver depth, but I mean, we'll get into that, but
Johnny, his first 3 picks were running backs and then didn't go for 10 more rounds to get his next running back. And then you got Willie doing the exact opposite, year 2 of doing the exact opposite, where he goes no running backs. His first running back was in round 7, and then his running backs are 2 rookies, and then the second running back in an offense who has a bit of an injury record. So
yeah, arguably no starting running backs on Willie's roster currently.
I'm not going to knock it because we saw what happened last year, but hey, it's a strategy.
It's a championship type of move from last year, but I mean, take your risks where you want to take your risks.
Yep. My last kind of overall takeaway was there are some teams with 2 defenses or 2 kickers. And I feel like it's so funny because like some teams like Colin, you're one of them with 2 defenses. Some players like to double down and feel like I don't need another defense or I don't need another kicker. Like I've got somebody who can get me through the bye week and like these, I'm going to ride or die with these. And then others, like I just took a kicker in round 17, Cam, I don't think you have a kicker yet, right?
I don't.
I
Like,
don't have a kicker. I don't either.
yeah. So like then others of us kind of zag the opposite way and kind of play I'll get one late. And if I have to stream, I'll stream at that position. Right. That's funny to see like who is like, I don't want to have to pick up another defense or another kicker all season versus those of us that don't really value those positions.
For sure. I definitely value the defense more than the average fantasy coach. I mean, obviously, I've usually always taken two defenses, but specifically with Jacksonville this year, they're in a very shitty division. Every quarterback in there is a rookie or a couple years, whatever. So like they have an easy schedule. So I felt like I had to take them. And unfortunately, in another one of our drafts, Rob had to take them. So this year or this draft, I was not going to let anyone else have the Jaguars, and that's why, I went quickly with the second defense.
I mean, it's a good idea, right? Like there's also trends within the league that lend themselves to taking those. I mean, that could be a value in and of itself, right? Or like that Saints pick that Willie had as well. NFC South is going to be bad this year as far as offensive firepower. Saints, I think, have probably the most well-rounded team in the entire division. So why not take your shot early on something that's a higher chance of hitting in a pretty at a position like defense or kicker that has a pretty high variance, right? So, take your shot there. I don't think they're bad picks. I also am just we've played fantasy football in this league this is our 11th year. I could pretty definitively tell you that every defensive kicker that I've drafted by probably week 7 is no longer on my roster, right? So it just, for me, they're usually an afterthought till the 18th and 19th round because I know that they're not going to be on there very long. And also knowing that there are people in this league who take defense in the 7th round, right? So like, I know I'm not going to get a top high profile defense. So I kind of take a backseat on that for a little while.
So while we're on it, the fact that you don't have a defense and a kicker, how do you feel about your team? Let's start with your team, about your own thoughts.
This draft has been interesting, right? In a ton of mocks, I saw somebody like Nick Chubb falling to me in the first round, right? But I kind of came around to the wide receiver stack. I like AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb. I like the two young guys I got at running back. I don't love the New York Jets situation with adding Dalvin Cook. I wanted to get him in a later round to handcuff, but part of the being in a league like this for so long is that people know kind of your strategy, and he never came back to me in the 7th round. So I like Trevor. I think my team is top heavy, and then when we get to the depth, kind of just flyers on people. Like I like J.K. Dobbins this year a lot. I like Pat Freiermuth. I could have taken Evan Ingram with a stack. I traded picks with Colin right there in the 8th round. Could have taken Evan Ingram. I just went with my guys. After missing on some of my guys later on in the draft, like I wanted in round 8 and 9, I really wanted to get Khalil Herbert and Quentin Johnston, right? It was another thing. The draft has been going on for so long that I was like, who did I want here? And I didn't look at my queue, and I was probably not in the best frame of mind to make a draft pick at that hour of the day. So I missed, right? So I ended up with Gabe Davis and Mike Thomas, right? I think those two round 8 and 9, similar to last year when I think it probably was earlier in the draft where I wanted to get Joe Burrow and Amon-Ra St. Brown, ended up with Jalen Hurts and T. Higgins. But I think that those two picks I'm going to keep my eye on those 4 players this year. How does Gabe Davis and Mike Thomas do compared to Quentin Johnston and Khalil Herbert? That's kind of like my fulcrum in the draft. Besides that, I mean, later on in the draft, aside from the news about Juju Smith-Schuster and his exploding knee, I mean, I like Allen exactly, allegedly. I like Allen Lazard. I think he has chemistry with Aaron Rodgers in New York. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. I wanted Romeo Doubs, and I got the stack with Jordan Love. And then, a side effect of this long draft is I probably wouldn't have taken Deion Jackson in another league, but the fact with Jonathan Taylor out and finding out about that in the middle of the draft, I figured it was probably a flyer, and Alec Pierce is another guy that I like. So the bench was really more about just picking the guys that I wanted rather than maybe the best overall available player. But that's kind of my strategy, was like get top heavy with guys who I knew were probably going to be starters or standouts, and then kind of just get my guys after that without any real rhyme or reason to fill out my bench.
All right.
Colin, your thoughts on your squad? The
Yeah.
most incomplete team remaining.
Yes, I still have 4 more picks, which I have all 4 of them locked in. I can almost guarantee I will get all 4 of the guys I want. But we move. I'm pretty confident. I'm happy. I'm definitely, I'm not like ecstatic. I'm not jumping out of my seat here. But I'm confident. The thing that kind of scares me is my wide receiver 3 is a rookie. He is a team stack with Justin Herbert, and there's a lot of expectations with him, Quentin Johnson. But he's a rookie at my wide receiver 3 spot is, just a general concern. I'm not very high on rookies generally. So the fact that I kind of have to start him right away, or he's going to be in a starting spot, is concerning, but I think he can step up to the plate. Generally speaking, I tried to go for guys that don't have a massive injury record, which is kind of hard in today's game. Everyone's got an injury record. Nobody is, plays in the NFL unscathed. Obviously Christian McCaffrey's just a bell cow, so he's gonna have the injuries, but he finishes the seasons, right? Like it's only really the past 2 seasons that he's had troubles, or the 2 seasons before last. Everything else, 16 and 17 games per season. Obviously Javonte Williams also just got injured last year. He only played 4 games last year. I'm expecting him to have a kind of a bounce back year, but overall, everyone else seems to be kind of consistent, not injury prone, and that's kind of an underlying factor I was taking into account for every pick. And with that comes consistency. I'm expecting consistency from these guys. I'm trying to stay away from the home run or bust kind of guy. And I feel like I got that with my players. So if I were to give myself like a draft grade through my first, I guess, 15 picks, because I have 4 more left, I give myself an A minus. But yeah, I'm feeling confident, especially because I know I'm going to get my next 4 guys too. At least I'm hoping.
Yeah, for me, I feel like the trade with Colin really helped my draft. I moved back like 10 spots in the 9th round and picked up an extra 13th rounder in exchange for my 18th rounder. I like my bench. I think having the extra 13th rounder really helped, which turned into Tyler Boyd. I'm wary at the quarterback spot because last year I drafted Stafford and Russell Wilson, and I don't know, they were probably like number 31 and number 32 in fantasy last year. And I just could not get anything going with them. I held on to them too late. I passed on like Daniel Jones and Geno Smith when they became like clear stars, believing that one of those 2 would get it together. So I'm going to have a short leash with Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff this season, but I feel safe with like 2 in the same division that one of these 2 quarterbacks have to perform. I feel like one of those 2 teams is going to win the division. So like, tell me that one of those 2 has a good year and I'll believe you. I similarly tried to stay young. I'm in the theme of trying to avoid injuries. I think my oldest starting skill position player is Njoku, and he's 27. Everybody else is 26 or younger. My theme with my running backs is like take the next step. You've got Tony Pollard, no Zeke there. He's the bell cow now. ETN, he's like had some good years, but people are expecting more. Damian Pierce, it's his show now. He's got a rookie quarterback. A lot can be asked of him. Mattinson, no Dalvin Cook there. Like, can he be RB1 in Minnesota? Like, if my running backs take the next step, I think this will be a really good team. And hopefully with 4 of them, 2 of them do. I like my wide receivers. Michael Pittman was the number 27 wide receiver the last year, and he's my wide receiver 3. So I like that. He's the clear wide receiver one in Indy, although he does have a rookie quarterback. But I don't know if quarterback play can be any worse than what Indy had last year. So
Do you see yourself starting all four of those running backs week one?
maybe not. I think if Kelsey's not going to go for Kansas City, I think Sky Moore could be like the number one weapon in that offense this week. So Sky Moore was my first pick on my bench. And if Kelsey's not going to go, then I might put Sky Moore in there over, I don't know, whoever's got like the worst matchup between Pierce and Mattinson or something. Might try and slot in an extra wide receiver there. But I could. I mean, I think all four of them will be getting a lot of touches. It's early in the season, so they're all healthy and ready to go. But we'll see.
I like the just one note about Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff, right? Like both on two proven offenses last year, both with pretty horrific defenses too, right? So
Yeah.
they're the best two teams in the division. They're going to have a lot of high scoring games because they don't have a defense that'll keep them, that'll keep them off the field, or they'll keep them on the field, I should say. So I like those two picks. So yeah, good. Even though you took a quarterback late, I think you might have been the last person to take a starting quarterback. Kirk Cousins is still very fantasy relevant, right? So
Absolutely.
I think that strategy, will end up paying dividends in the future.
I was holding my breath. Kirk.
I still see you, Cam. I think Nick dropped.
Are you there?
There we go.
Oh, sorry. I was holding my breath in the ninth round. I traded that second pick in the ninth round and moved back to 12. And I knew Johnny didn't have a quarterback yet either. And he really likes Kirk Cousins and took Cousins last year. So I was praying that Johnny wouldn't take him, and he took Treylon Burks. And then I mean, three quarterbacks went in that round before Cousins got back to me, none of whom I wanted. So I was very grateful that I was able to get my guy 10 picks later.
Yeah, I think with our trade specifically, I liked Cam and I's trade just for overall value. I think we both came out on the good end. I think I gave you too much, giving you a 13th rounder for my 18th just to move, up, I guess 10 spots or whatever. But now that it's said and done, I got my two guys out of both those trades. So like it really wasn't that much value. It wasn't really that terrible of a trade, even though it was probably too much overall. I got my guys. I'm happy with the trades.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like Cam might have very well taken Quentin Johnson there at the next pick. So you probably did sneak up to get him at the exact right time.
Yeah. I think it worked out.
Any pick in the draft that you're scratching your head about, not sure if that was good value or why that person made that selection?
So the obvious one has got to be 49ers D in the 7th round. The next defense didn't go until the 10th round. So that's the most obvious one. And then nothing that stands out like that, but I would say just questionable overall. Troy has 3 quarterbacks and 2 of them have the same bye. So that's, I literally scratched my head when I saw that, but other than that, nothing stood out to me.
Yeah, I wonder on that one if he maybe just noticed after taking Rodgers.
Yeah.
But for me, it's Kadarius Toney in the 6th round to Willie. I think Kadarius Toney's average draft position was like 109th or something, and he went 62nd overall. He probably would have been available around later, maybe 2 rounds later at 8-2. And Willie already had 3 wide receivers and no running backs. He could have had Pacheco or Cook or Swift or Akers or Williams. There were still really good running backs available there. To take a wide receiver who's probably wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 1 when he's healthy, but we don't know if he's healthy.
Right. Hasn't played a full season.
Didn't even want him. Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a little bit of a questionable move. I'll be interested. I hope it works out for him. I hope Kadarius Toney turns into a stud. But he's probably going to be in a flex spot, and it seemed a little early to me to reach for Kadarius.
Yeah, we've all seen the talent. We know Kadarius Toney can do it. but can he do it for more than 2 games in a row? Can he do it
Yeah.
for a stretch of games that isn't one, can he do it for an extended period of time, really?
I think that was a get your guy kind of pick. I think Willie's drafted
Sure.
Kadarius in the past couple of leagues, but I agree. He probably could have gotten Kadarius Toney and somebody else in that pick. I have 3 picks that kind of, well, 2 picks and then a stretch of picks for one team that kind of scratched my head. I'll start with the stretch of picks. So Jason's round 4 through 7 was interesting, especially knowing that Jonathan Taylor is going to be out for the first 4 weeks and not taking his actual true RB1 until round 7. I mean, Rashad White's still a formidable starter, right? But I was curious as to why he didn't. Maybe he picked his wide receiver 4 before he got his true running back number 1, at least for weeks 1 through 4. So I thought that might have been, I might have done that a little bit differently, especially maybe that fourth round 4 pick with Brandon Ayuk. You still had people like Madison, Aaron Jones, who fell pretty far actually. Matt, like those are some pretty solid guys you can fill in for those first couple of weeks. I thought that Johnny taking Hollywood Brown in the 8th was interesting because, yeah, he had 3 studs in their own right at running back. I think that he probably could have shored up his RB4 with the James Conner or Khalil Herbert or even somebody like Kamara. I don't really love the Cardinals offense this year. I thought that was an interesting pick, although he probably was the best available receiver at the time and he could pop off at any time. He's the clear wide receiver 1 there. I just was interested as to why maybe he loaded up on wide receivers in those 6 rounds. So thought that was interesting. And then also Willie drafting Evan McPherson in the 13th, right? I was waiting for him to draft him as RB3, right? And he ended up getting Damian Harris later on, but I thought that, I guess there really wasn't too much difference in those 2 picks, but I thought he probably could have gotten somebody else with that pick that might have served him a little bit better and waited on McPherson. But I thought those are 3 interesting selections.
Yeah, on Jason's team, I'll be hoping that I play him in weeks 1 through 4 because he's got Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, and Jameson Williams, all of whom will be starting the season on the sidelines. So get your matchup with Jason in early if the schedule gods favor you, because that lineup is going to get a lot better as the year goes on. How about best value pick?
I got 5 of these that stood out to me. I liked your ETN pick in round 3, Nico. I think that he fell, in my opinion, there. Especially after what didn't the coach say that he was going to get him specifically
1,800 yards?
Yeah, like he was going to do that. He was going to make it happen. So the fact that the running back in a high-powered offense like that fell to the 3rd round, I was shooketh, one might say. Another one, Hawkinson in the 5th round to Rob. That's an elite tight end in a pretty good offense. These guys, I guess best value pick is the guys you were surprised that fell. So He fell to me. Hawkinson fell to me. He went behind Kittle and Andrews. And he was the number 2 tight end last year. He finished number 2 last year and finished top 5 just 2 years ago. So that guy's an elite tight end going in the 5th round. That surprised me as well. And then you got James Conner in the 8th, and James Conner in the 8th, number RB1 in that offense. I know it's not that great compared to years past, especially without Kyler Murray. But that's an RB1 going in the 8th round. That's eye-opening for me. Another one, I would say my pick, Ingram in the 8th as well. Like I moved up for him specifically and got him. So it worked out for me, but I couldn't believe he was there. And that's why I felt so obligated to make that trade kind of happen when it did. I was surprised to see him. I thought some of these guys that I'm saying would have been reached for. They would have gone before the ADP and they went behind. So that's like the biggest surprise for me. And then the last one was Tyler Conklin in the 14th. His ADP was low, but that's a tight end 1 with an elite quarterback in a new offense. They're going to be getting the tight end the ball a lot. He's an athlete. In the 14th round, he should have been going a lot earlier, and he's one of these guys that I wanted to get, who I didn't. But yeah, Tyler. But those are the guys that I was best value picks for me.
Nick, who are your value picks?
So I'll go in the order they were drafted. My first two are actually back to back. Darren Waller to Willie at 5.11. I mean, he is likely going to be the most targeted player in that Giants offense. I think he was also, I think, maybe the fifth or sixth tight end picked and could very well, if he stays healthy, end up as tight end 1 or 2 this season. I thought that was great value. And then Trevor Lawrence, Cam, to you at 5.12. Also like the seventh or eighth quarterback pick. I think the Jags offense is going to be bananas this year. I really am high on the Jags as a team against that schedule in that division. I think he's going to put up massive numbers. So I thought that was great value there at the end of the fifth. I'll go to Jason with Rashad White, 7-1. He's the clear RB1 in Tampa. And there were like backups taken before he was taken in some cases, or guys who were in timeshares at least. So I think that was a great value. And then kind of Josh's whole bench, I really like. I know it was kind of a meme in like the text that we were only giving him like big ups on his bench, but I feel like each player that he's picked for his bench is like a guy that I liked and that I was taking in mocks and good value for where he picked them. And Eric's pick of Laporta in the 12th round. I think he's super athletic. I really like the Detroit offense. I mean, I took Goff as my QB2. I feel like wide receivers and tight ends have a difficult time adjusting as rookies, so that could weigh against him early in the season. But Laporta could be a guy who surprises, and I think that was really good value for his second tight end.
Yeah. I mean, those are all. I love the Jalen Hyatt pick in 13.6. I don't really know who the wide receiver one in that offense is in New York. I think that Jalen Hyatt, from what I've heard in camp, he was running like a 4.2 in pads, like some crazy stuff. So he could be that guy. I like that pick. I also like Johnny getting, or sorry, not Johnny, Eric getting Jahan Dotson at 7.9. We don't know what's going to happen with Terry McLaurin in the first couple of weeks. He's flashed in preseason, got some good chemistry with Sam Howell. I would have taken Jahan Dotson if he was still there at 7.12. And I also like, similarly on Jason's team, I like Khalil Herbert. I was drafting him in a lot of drafts. I think he's the RB1 in Chicago. I know there's kind of a lot of mouths to feed there. He looked really good in preseason. Similar to what Nick said about Rashad White in Tampa. It was interesting that Khalil Herbert went after somebody like a DeAndre Swift or a Pacheco, where there might be the RB1, they might not be. So I just thought it was interesting that he kind of went the way that he did. So those are three value picks that I liked.
Who was the number one guy that you wanted that you didn't get?
As I said, Conklin, but I mean that's a 14th rounder, so can't be the number one guy. But I love Conklin there. I would say that guy that I really missed out on, who kind of Willie didn't reach for him, but he took him early, and that was Zay Flowers. I think that rookie wide receiver in that offense, he's been popping in preseason. You've heard a lot about him. I wanted him, and he didn't fall to me. I mean, he didn't. It's not that he didn't even fall to me. He was taken before his ADP. He was taken before he was on the draft board. You had to scroll to find him at that spot, and that's a big disappointment. You might see me trading for him in the near future. I don't know.
I kind of touched on this earlier, but I really wanted to get Khalil Herbert and Quentin Johnson in that 8-9 pick when I traded with Colin. I was actually eyeing, that was kind of the reason why I took that trade, because I saw they were kind of in that next realm of picks. And I was like, all right, I kind of fumbled the bag there on the actual Gabe Davis selection, but I wanted to get those two. And then I also wanted to get Zach Charbonnet to kind of handcuff to Kenneth Walker. It wouldn't have really worked out with the draft strategy that I took. I wanted to get a tight end in around 7 or 8. But I think he went way higher than he was expected to go, maybe a round or two higher. I wanted to get him too.
Yeah, for me, on Rob's team, Tank Bigsby, I was between Elijah Mitchell and Tank Bigsby, and I took Elijah Mitchell because I thought he was the bigger name, and maybe Tank would make his way back around. And Rob didn't allow that to happen, which was frustrating for me. Um, and then I'll also go to Troy's team, Okonkwo, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, the tight end on Tennessee. I really like him. I have him in the other league that I'm in. I think he's primed to break out. And I was eyeing him if he could get back to me as well for my tight end too. And just went earlier as Troy's tight end one. So you can tell how he valued him. I thought those were two good picks, guys that I had my eye on and that I've drafted in other leagues or wanted really badly.
I
So
remember
who's your?
when, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was just going to say, I remember when in that round, I know Troy was eyeing a tight end because Alex, a couple picks before, got his tight end number 3 in Dalton Schultz. And Troy texted in the group, he said, do not reach for these people. So I think he was eyeing Dalton Schultz. I don't think that Okonkwo is, a bad tight end one, but I know that Troy was looking for a Dalton Schultz probably earlier or defaulted him in that round.
Yep. Do you have a favorite roster? Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
No, I just realized Alex's tight ends are both named Dalton. Or two of his 4 tight ends are named Dalton. So that's there's a trend right there.
And I mean, like as we were saying, he's on the clock right now, and news broke today about his favorite tight end being hurt. You could see him take a 5th tight end here. So we'll see. Over under one more tight end that Alex takes or push.
I mean, let's see who's still available right now. Yeah. I mean, you still have some tight ends that are, I mean, I don't know if you wanted to handcuff a tight end, but Dawson Knox still available in Buffalo.
There's a good amount of tight ends out there.
Yeah, there's still some folks that he can, then I'll take that. I'll take the over on the 0.5 tight ends. Alex drafts in the last 3 rounds.
So if you had to trade your team for somebody else's team, who would you be trading for? What roster is your favorite out there?
Surprisingly, even though Trevor does have, let's see here, Trevor has 2 quarterbacks, 2 kickers, and took a defense in the 7th round. He has a good team. You know, if you look at the overall, what he's got, I mean, Devin Singletary, his RB4, which is okay. You only need to start 2 running backs, but just overall, like I like his team. And then the other 2, I would say, I didn't really have a favorite, but Eric and Troy's team, they just speak to me. I don't really have a real explanation. I just like their combo of players. They have a good roster buildup. And so those 2 specifically, even though again, Troy has 3 quarterbacks, some of these questionable decisions I kind of like somehow.
I also like Eric's team. I mean, I liked his team last year when he drafted 2. I don't really see a true weak point in his team. I mean, maybe his RB2, who knows what happens with Dalvin Cook. Dave Montgomery was a good value pick. He always seems to get good value when picks fall to him. So if I was to trade with anybody's team, it would probably be Eric's.
Cam, I'm going to go with yours. Maybe surprising being the last pick in the draft, but maybe not surprising in that you and I tend to like the same guys. And it's more annoying when you and I are picking right next to each other and we keep picking the guy that the other one wanted with the very next pick. But yeah, I mean, I already talked about Trevor Lawrence. I love Pat Freiermuth. I love Gerald Everett, Romeo Dowds, Jordan Love, Alec Pierce, all guys that I love. And Deion Jackson, as you said, great value when you got him. Fortunate break for where the merry-go-round was of picks when that came out. So I really like your roster. I think you're in prime position to hold on to that trophy over your shoulder there.
Yeah, baby.
How about let's go the opposite direction. A favorite to potentially win the toilet bowl this year.
I mean, I got to go with the 2-peat. I think it's going to be Jason. He's going to have a slow start. And from experience, it's hard to recover from, maybe like an 0-8 start. And he won it last year. So that's the easy pick for me right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think my toilet bowl matchup will be Jason and Trevor. Even though Trevor's team, he does have good players in good spots. I'm just concerned that he doesn't have. I mean, when you take two kickers and a defense that early, you don't give yourself a lot of depth, especially at the running back position, right? So I'm interested to see if he's able to hold on with those running backs because that could be the make or break for him. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's his first year back in the league. Um, but that was just my initial thought is like probably Jason and Trevor. But as Colin said last year in the post draft pod, prove me wrong, Trevor.
I think those are fair picks. I'm gonna go with Josh's team, and this is difficult because I truly do love his bench, but I worry looking at his starters. I feel like this is the year Derrick Henry starts to slip and fall off a little bit. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going to be good. I think he's a rookie. I don't know for sure what he's going to bring. Keenan Allen, I don't think he makes it through a season playing every game. Cortland Sutton, is he good in that offense? Is he not? He's kind of been a disappointment throughout his career. I've been hearing Kyle Pitts is a bit of a disappointment in camp for the Falcons this year. I personally love Kyle Pitts, but that worries me. Um, James Conner, he's got injury issues. That offense is terrible. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot. Rashee Rice, I mean, again, a rookie on an offense where is he wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3? I don't really know what his role is. I know they've said he's going to start on the bench and be a package player to start the season. But to me, when I look at that starting lineup, I think that's weaker than some of the others in the league. I do think he's got depth and can maybe weather the storm. But if I've got to pick a different team to nominate for the toilet bowl, I'm gonna put Josh's up there.
Fair. He has a lot of faith in those three rookie receivers, Rashee Rice, Jonathan Mingo, and Jalen Hyatt. He's expecting. I mean, if one of those guys hits, it works. But that's a lot of faith in youth right there, considering
Yeah.
his starting lineup is on the over the hump, over the 30-year-old hump.
Yep. So I mean, we can't really preview week one too much since we don't have matchups out yet and we haven't quite finished the draft. But yeah, any thoughts as we head into week one, or any thoughts on your particular players with their matchups, or who are you hoping to draw? Is the answer obviously Jason, given half his team is suspended or not playing week one?
Yeah, I mean, week one is almost always impossible to predict. So I'm kind of ready for anything. I'm expecting a solid start out of my team specifically. Maybe not so strong a starts out of Jason, Trevor, as you said, Josh. A lot of questionable starters there. But week one is probably my favorite week just because we're so deprived of it for the past, what, 5, 6 months or whatever. And then all of a sudden there's like 70 touchdowns within like 6 hours. And you're like, okay, this is what
We're
I needed.
back.
This
Yeah,
is where this we're back. I mean, college football is great, but the NFL is king, and fantasy football just makes it that much better.
I totally agree. I'm just ready and it's also, I mean, Chiefs Lions gonna be a shootout. I think in week first game. I'm so excited for that game. So excited to be back. We've been deprived for too long. Um, yeah. I mean, I did have a question for you guys since there was a pretty large variety of maybe let's call it first 4 or 5 picks for each team in the draft. I kind of wanted to ask you guys like who is your given that some folks went RB heavy in the first 5 rounds or 6 rounds, and some folks went wide receiver heavy, some folks had a more balance, some folks sprinkled in quarterbacks and tight ends. Who is y'all's favorite running back room? Let's call it the top 4 running backs or top 3 running backs, I guess, and then who is your favorite wide receiver room with the top 4 receivers?
These are good questions. I would have to say Nick and I have the best running back rooms just for the sole purpose of us having the only two teams that have four running backs, RB1s for that matter, in the first 7 rounds. So just based on strength at the top, it's got to be being Nick in the running back room. Um, and then for the same exact point, you could say with Willie with the receiver room, even though we did mention that Kadarius Toney is a big question mark. He's got 4 receivers in the first 6 rounds, which I don't think anyone else did. Oh, Jason did, and that's a good receiver room too. So
I'll
I guess
go.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree on the running back rooms. I'm gonna nominate Trevor on the wide receiver room. Amon-Ra St. Brown was another one who I would have taken had he fallen 2 more spots to me. Metcalf was another one that I would have taken had he fallen 2 more spots to me. I love Olave. I had him last year, and he was pretty darn good as a rookie. He was number 22 wide receiver as a rookie, so I think he's going to be even better as a second-year guy. Um, so I think those top 3 wide receivers are really good. Brandon Cooks, he performs everywhere he goes, and he should have a better offense for him this season. So I think that's a great wide receiver 4. I really like Trevor's wide receiver room.
I'm just looking at the draft here now, and I just realized that Rob has 7 running backs and only 3 receivers on his roster. So I'm sure he's got to go receiver. He already has his defense and his kicker in the last 3 rounds. I didn't even realize that he only had 3 on his roster. And one of them is going to be out, I think, for the first week. I don't think Terry McLaurin's, he was in a walking boot earlier this week. I don't think he's going to be starting for the Commanders this week. So really only has 2 that are going to be playing this week. So I don't really love that receiver room. I don't really love the first 2 receivers that Johnny 3 picked. I like Jerry Jeudy. I'm not sold on Amari Cooper, although it's the first, I think he'll take a step up with Deshaun Watson. But I like the middle round value that he got there as well with Jordan Addison. I think he's going to pop off this year. Kirk Cousins is going to throw him the ball. There's going to be a lot of double team action on Justin Jefferson. And Nico Collins is a good pick too. But I agree. I mean, top heavy running back stables with Nick and Colin, and then Willie as well with his receiver room. So interested to see how Rob plays out the last 3 rounds.
A good shout for Johnny 3's running back room. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris. Those are bell cows by very definition.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good running back room. So yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we'll wrap this up. Hopefully we can wrap this draft up soon. And we'll be back same time next week with a review of week 1 and a preview of week 2.
Sounds
Let's
good, boys.
Forward to it.
Good chatting with y'all.
Best of luck, y'all. May the best team win.
Yes, sir.